Today we're talking about my perpetually unfinished Princess Serenity cosplay. I actually made this at the end of 2020 and the very beginning of 2021, which means I mostly only have photos of it being made because this was pre-YouTube. But there is enough for me to explain how I did it and why it's gone unfinished for 5 years. Quick lore, though, on Princess Serenity, because the character itself, like, the dress on the character has several different versions, and then there's also several different versions of Princess Serenity. In terms of the dress in Sailor Moon, there's the manga version, which looks more like this. There's the original anime's version, which does not have these swoopies. And then there is the Sailor Moon Crystal version, which was the, like, remake anime in the early 2010s that stayed a little closer to the manga. And in Crystal, it looks more like this. I think when I originally made this, I was going for the Crystal version, but here's the other thing, is Princess Serenity also has multiple versions. There is Princess Serenity, who is not technically Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon is the reincarnation of Princess Serenity. There's also, in the original anime, Sailor Moon transforms into Princess Serenity sometimes to get, like, more powers, but I don't think that actually happens in the manga, but it's a thing that happens in the original anime. And then there is Neo Queen Serenity, who is Sailor Moon, like, in the future. And then there's also Queen Serenity, who is Princess Serenity's mother, but she doesn't have the same dress. Either way, whatever it is, all of them are inspired by a 1992 Dior gown because Naoko Takeuchi was, like, really into, like, high fashion. I wrote this down. It is called, and I'm going to butcher this, Palladio dress by Gianfranco Ferre for Dior, 1992. The original Dior dress is inspired by an ionic column, which is just a kind of the kind of column with the swirlies. It's an ionic column. I certainly look like an ionic column wearing this thing. It's very pretty. But anyway, which one did I go for? Which version? I think originally I was going for the Sailor Moon Crystal version, but this past week, while I was working on it, we may be venturing a little closer to Neo Queen Serenity, who is sometimes shown with a very large bow. It's whatever. It's Sailor Moon. This is Sailor Moon lore. Anime stuff. Anyway, let's talk about how this thing was made. The dress itself. It is not a super complicated dress, but the way I did it was weird and stupid. I don't think I would do this way now. The bodice is just like a very simple princess-themed bodice, so this is the front panel, and this is a fine way to do this. I don't know why I did the ruching this way. Like, it looks good. Not that you can see any of it with all the stuff on it. But essentially, I just gathered chiffon over a layer of dull bridal satin and then flatlined them together. The inside is then flatlined with more dull bridal satin, but there is no interfacing. But it is boned on all of the seams with what I'm pretty sure feels like the wide zip ties. I don't know that I would recommend doing this kind of thing as a base dress for Princess Serenity. The skirt is a very interfaced waistband, so a very thick and sturdy waistband. And then there's only 2 skirts. There's dull bridal satin under here. Oh, there's 3. What? I put 3 skirts in here. What? Well, I didn't even realize that. There's also tulle in here. I don't know why. Oh, there's tulle. I don't even remember doing this. This I do remember doing. At some point in 2020, I was like, I'm gonna make a cosplay of the child version of Princess Zelda from Ocarina of Time. And then I made this skirt and then never did anything else for that. And then later in 2020, I was like, I have all of this leftover gold beading from making my Sakizo, and I have a bunch of white fabric. I'm gonna make Princess Serenity. And so I did. But this skirt was originally cut for the child version of Princess Zelda. So it is not a circle skirt. It is like a paneled skirt with a big panel in the front, 2 side panels, and 2 back panels, I believe. Elephant in the room. The original Princess Serenity dress and the original Dior dress have an empire waist. It goes up here, but The crystal version and sometimes kind of the manga version do show it going a little lower, but I was like, I have this already cut and sewn together skirt. I'm gonna use this, but also I was pretty afraid of an unpure waist, so I was like, we're gonna keep this as high as possible. Part of that decision is why this has gone unfinished for so long. Anyway, on top of the dull bridal satin, there is a somehow completely forgotten, very thin, like not really doing a lot layer of tulle that has a fishing line hem. So a fishing line hem, there's no way y'all didn't hear that. You put fishing line in the hem and you can either do like a baby hem for it, but this looks like I just zigzagged it in. It is the kind of thing you would want to look at for Princess Serenity for the outermost skirt. However, I think originally I did a fishing line hem on the chiffon skirt and then I didn't like it. I feel like I remember doing that and ended up hemming it with horsehair braid. Fishing line hems are cool because they give you that like curly Q effect, which works pretty well with tulle, but sometimes it looks really weird with chiffon. In fact, I think sometimes horsehair braid can even look a little weird with chiffon because it's so lightweight. And this in particular is like, it needs to be loved a little bit because it's been shoved in a closet for 6 years. It certainly needs another row of stitches to keep it from doing this bullshit. When it's sitting hanging, it pops the horsehair braid out, and another stitch across the top of the horsehair braid would stop that. Other thing not great about this and my craftsmanship in 2020 is this seam. It's a little bunchy. It's a little ugh. It's not that cute. This whole cosplay is just a little in a couple places, but then like overall I put it on and it's like really, really, really pretty. Next up though is probably the most interesting thing, the beaded donuts. So these, obviously the first thing you want to do with this is figure out where your placement is going to be. And it looks like originally I was going to do a bunch of little circles, which is another reason why I keep saying this is unfinished, because there's like the vision of what I was going to do and then what I did actually do and eventually stopped doing. What you're looking at is a layer of felt with a layer of chiffon laid over top of it that has a circle sewn into it. I then cut the circle out and burned the edges, which you can only do with a polyester chiffon and polyester felt. If you've seen me bead before, you might know that I do love beading on felt, but like I don't usually cut the shape out before I actually do the beading, but with these, I did the shape first. I think because the chiffon was on there and I knew I was going to need to burn the chiffon, like you don't need to burn the edge of felt because it doesn't fray, but chiffon would, which I don't love doing. It does kind of make beading harder. And speaking of making beading harder, what that is a line of seed beads that have been beaded around the edge, which is not an easy feat, especially if you're going size 11. Size 11 is like the smallest size, but they are just the prettiest. They are so tiny and delicate. If you have seen any of my beading before, this will look very familiar because all this is a line of seed beads around the outside and then a sequin and bead rope and then a line of pearls in the middle. There is the overview of what I did to do this. Felt and chiffon sewn into a circle, cut out the circle, burn the edge, seed bead, rope, pearls, and then it looks like more sequins in the middle with a bead holding them down. I have a new and fun thing that will be like, why are we doing this to some of you? But some of you, it'll be fun. I have explained beading many times, and so why try to explain it again when I have done so much better? These are very similar to beading I have done in the past and beading I have explained in the past, including my strawberry dress. If you want to know how this beading was done, this is essentially exactly the same thing except in red. So
the beading is really tedious, but the way I do it is actually pretty easy. I use a felt backing, and the design I did for these can be broken down into 3 parts. The first border is a solid line of seed beads, and to get a nice straight line, I go through the felt, add the beads, set the stitch where the beads naturally end, then backstitch to halfway through the beads, going through the beads again so the thread is starting by coming through the beads and not through the backing, which is what keeps them in a straight line. The second border is done by starting with a sequin, adding a set number of seed beads, and letting them curve over at an angle to form kind of a rope.
I'm back. Yes, helpful. You'll watch it anytime. Okay. It also gives me an excuse to like go to the bathroom. That's what the back looks like. Back then, I did not have little beading holders and I used to use little ranch lid cups to hold my beads. But there she is coming together. Those are just hand sewn onto the actual dress, whip stitched around the bottom and then whip stitched across the top of the dress, but there isn't actually any support for them, so they do they stand up on their own okay, but they do also kind of flop. Next up is the thing that might be most helpful. This is the bubble sleeves. I first have to start by saying I do not know if I recommend doing the bubble sleeves this way because these are not comfortable. I used EVA foam for these. I used 10mm EVA foam. If you were going to do this with EVA foam, you might have a better time using 6mm, 4mm EVA foam. This is Evil Ted's dome pattern. I have used that dome pattern for so many things. 4 pieces of his pattern make a dome, and 8 pieces of that pattern make a sphere. Looks like I cut 8. I don't think there's actually 8 in there, but it's just his dome pattern with like the tips cut off so that it became more of a donut. I glued these with contact cement. That is the old porch at my old house. If you're curious, this is 2 moves ago, but it had this really old rickety outdoor like raised porch like on the 2nd floor. That's where I did all my EVA foam stuff with that really dirty Walmart table. I don't even know if I still have that dirty ass Walmart table. But you really wouldn't need to contact cement these because you're not going to see any of the seams because it did get covered in fabric. But if you are going to use contact cement, do it outside and use a respirator. However, if you do end up doing this and you do it with If you do it with 10mm EVA foam, you're going to have to heat shape them because they will not get into that shape without it. But if you did like 6, you might not even need to do that. This is why they're uncomfortable. They just squeeze on your arm and it's just like not a great thing. You could also do an upholstery foam, a furry foam, as I call it. But this is what happened next. This is where I thought I was gonna be real precise with this. So I did a duct tape pattern over my EVA foam balls, and I ended up with this crazy complicated duct tape pattern. I was like, I need all of these different shapes because I don't know what I thought I was going to need to do to these to achieve just this like one freaking swirl, but I thought I needed up to H pieces, A through H. That's 8? Thanks, Bridgerton. I thought I needed 8 pieces. And I look at this now and I'm like, what? And apparently back then I looked at that after I got it off and I was like, what? Because I didn't end up really doing all 8 pieces. What ended up being important was what is marked on this as B, which is just this like big swirl shape. Looks like I made C, but then didn't use it. Because that's not on here. This piece is what did actually end up getting onto the cosplay. What is going on here? Make me big. And biggin. Tangent. Is anyone else watching the Corey Richins trial and how the prosecutor has multiple times said in biggin? So EVA foam on the inside. The EVA foam was then covered in a layer of cotton batting. You can kind of see it in there. There's cotton batting on top of the EVA foam. And then I just took kind of like a long piece of chiffon and gathered it and sewed that in. I think the cotton batting is just glued on. Yeah, it feels like it's hot glued like internally right here. And then I think, the chiffon is just hot glued too. There are some stitches in here. So I think I like whip stitched a little bit. And I definitely like, this actually, one of these broke, like as I put them on to wear for the Bridgerton video, like one of the straps popped off. This is the part I want to fix because I feel like I don't like that there's just a gap and you can just see my arm and that you can just see this. I want to make like another little panel that sits right here that's stretchy and then give it a little loop so that it just attaches to the top of the dress. But there's nothing on the back, just the gathered chiffon with that B shape. So if you see, there isn't like a bunch of pieces. This is just one big shape that's been placed over and tacked onto it. And then this piece is also tacked down. It's a totally different piece. So the only thing from that weird duct tape pattern that I even used was this singular piece because it gives all of the shape. It's essentially the outside of that curve, but because it's like the middle piece, it creates the look that there's a bunch of swoopies when there's actually only one swoopy. And then these are just like also felt with the chiffon with beads over it. Like, I like the way these look. I certainly like these. They're just, one, they're not comfortable and they need some work, they could be comfortable, but they need like me to like actually commit to fixing them. Like, yeah, that's the other thing. It's like this one has like a couple of extra pearls on it. This one does not. There's just like little things that are like not done. There's like things that are done to one thing and not to the other. This though, up next, this is where it all went wrong, and apparently went wrong with how I placed it in OBS because I've just covered myself. There we go. So the rest of the details is where the root of not finishing this is. So these pieces, these like beaded things, I did all of the beading except for a little bit of it, not on the actual dress itself, which is the root of a lot of the problems with this. Doing the circlies off the dress is totally fine. You don't need to do the circlies on the dress. These pieces here are essentially just beaded ropes done on felt. Those worked fine as well, getting them onto the dress that way. That was also totally fine. These pearls, the pearls above them, they are sewn directly onto the dress. There's the rope going on. This was all fine. Everything was good. Everything was looking so beautiful in detail, and I was so proud of it. And then we get to the swoopies. This is where everything went wrong. So again, I did the beading externally. I made a bunch of swoopies. I think some of them are even connected. They're not all on a singular one like that one is. They're done essentially the same way as the circlies. It is just a line of seed beads and the line of like sequin and bead rope on felt. The problem is that I either didn't like measure correctly or I'm just dumb. What ended up happening, I will have to embiggen to show you. So for one, they're only really tacked on. They're not like fully sewn on because essentially what happened was I went to put them on, and for one, they like go past the waistband, which gives me this weird little section right here. And then on the back, it gets way worse. Like, do you see how this one is just like mushed? It's just mushed into place. Like, look at that. It's literally like folded up because it didn't fit right. And this one's also like falling apart. And also these don't all go all the way back. And also, look at that. There's just so much stuff with this that was like, I got to this point. This was beautiful. This part was beautiful. All this work to make all of these. And then I go to put these on and they don't fit right. And the one in the back has to get mushed. And I just gave up. Because I was like, all of this beading is so beautiful and impressive. And then it's like very clear, like something's f***y with this. This is why this went unfinished for so long, is the swoopies. They were the last thing I did. I think there was also like a pretty large gap in time between me doing this stuff and me doing these. Because obviously those took a while to make, and it's like when you make something and you don't measure correctly and then it doesn't go on the actual garment correctly, it's just like, this looks bad now. That was just pinned on. Don't panic. These are the last progress photos I have from back then, is these being on. And this is, it's like, I don't like that they overlap the waistband. I don't like that I had to bunch them up. I don't like them. They don't look great. And I've always said that I would like redo those, but that would be a lot of work to redo those. And I don't know if I'm gonna do that. We'll get to why later, but first we gotta get to what is something I am very happy about. This bow. Look at this. This deserves the stars. Was that fun and cool? Love this bow. I made this bow this week. This was the other thing about this cosplay, and the reason why it went unworn for so long, is I ended up giving away part of the original bow. I did make a bow back then. So here's the original bow. Look how. You're so tiny. Like, what? It's fine. It's a fine bow. It's a fine, normal, some would say large bow. But when you compare it to this bow, this is a hair bow. It's a tiny bow. This is 2 layers of chiffon with a layer of stiff net flatlined to one of the layers of chiffon, and then the 2 layers of chiffon got bag-lined together. It is the Cosmic Cotier style bow. You'll see kind of how this was made. It's made exactly the same way as this one, except this one is bigger and needed more structure. Gigantic bow definitely looks better. Here's the thing. You know what it also does? Covers up all the up swoopies in the back. Sure does. It's like this. Very nice. There's just a bitty bow here. Without the bow. So dumb. Here's this bow. I would like to complain though. Here's my other button that's very cool and fun. This bow gave me a back injury. I'm being serious. Not technically a back injury, technically a rib injury. What happened was when I was doing this, I like got the pattern ready, and then I like took the pattern and I held it behind my back and like looked in the mirror to like see if I liked the silhouette. I got the stiff net cut out. It's got stiff net in it. Held the stiff net cut out behind my back to see if I liked it. Did the same thing with a bunch of different, as the process was going on, I kept holding it behind my back to see if I liked how it looked. A few hours into that, I just got this like take your breath away kind of pain in my ribs. What I'm pretty sure I had, what I got was a intercostal muscle strain. Here's the other thing, if you don't know. Last year, I found out that I'm actually hypermobile. So sometimes my body parts, specifically my joints, just do stuff that they're not supposed to do, and then I get hurt and I have to, try to strengthen my muscles to make that not happen. And if I engaged my core, I could keep away the pain. But yeah, this bow knocked me out for like 2 days. I had to just like sit around and not do as much because I was holding things behind my back. And just because my body can do a thing doesn't mean it's supposed to. Just a thing I'm having to learn in my 30s. Anyway, the bow. The big bow. So I made some mistakes with this. This took me so much longer than it should have. 1, because it injured me, and 2, because I did some dumb stuff. There's 2 pieces of important structure, and there's a piece of structure that I tried to put in there that ended up not being needed. But the important structure is stiff net. Again, stiff net is sometimes called like crinoline net. Sometimes it's just called crinoline. I buy it usually from Fabric Wholesale Direct. It's pretty cheap. It's got a really good stiffness to it. But the reason I wanted to use it instead of like an interfacing is because it's net, so it's sheer. So this bow is, it's semi-opaque. It's not fully see-through. We'll get to why it's not fully see-through. There's a way to make this even more see-through. But what I did was I cut out a layer of stiff net from a very large bow pattern. If you've never seen a loop bow pattern before, that's what it looks like. It's like a curved trapezoid, and that is 1/2 of 1/2 of the bow. So there's 2 different pieces of stiff net, but you cut on the fold of that part so that it opens up to where you have like a full side of the loop. This is what I didn't need to do. I did this and this caused so many problems. So I thought I'm gonna add some horsehair braid to this to try and be the structure. I was opposed to using wire for some reason, and I thought maybe this will stand up if I do horsehair braid in an X across each loop. And this did not end up looking good at all. The one going long ways, like I feel like it could work, especially if you did like a square style bow and put horsehair braid on the top and bottom or in the top and middle. But the one in the middle just made it look so strange. Like it ended up looking really boxy where that horsehair braid was. So I don't recommend doing that. It lost so much of like the nice curve of a bow, which is what you would want in a loop bow. That's how the stiff net looked. I was happy with the size. And then I did more dumb stuff. So, like I said with the original bow is 2 layers of chiffon and a layer of stiff net on the inside, but the stiff net was flatlined to the chiffon before I sewed them all together. I did not do that here because I'm dumb. This is the layers of the actual bow. So this is leftover white voile from my wedding dress. I just still have quite a bit of it. And I don't have any chiffon, and I didn't want to buy chiffon. And I would actually recommend, even if you make the dress out of chiffon, to consider something like a sheer voile or an organza for if you're going to do a large bow like this, because it's gonna be lighter weight than the chiffon. But this is now 4 sides of one loop. There's 4 of that shape cut out in the voile. This was dumb. This is not what I needed to do. What I did here was I bag lined this on either side, or I serged it on either side, and then I turned it inside out, and then I pressed it, and it looked pretty nice, but it had no structure. And the thing that made this look terrible was instead of flatlining the net, I shoved it inside, which meant they were not connected, which meant the sizes were not quite right, which made it look... Takes me a little too long to get to the Hank button. I'm using the Hank button more than I thought I would. It doesn't look good. It looked bad. And then at this point, I had hurt my back. And so I was just like, fuck. I was trying to get this done this week so that I could stream this with y'all and show y'all how I've finished this cosplay with this beautiful bow, and then it looked bad. And so I think this was yesterday or Friday. I had recovered from my muscle strain with the power of holding my abs tight to stabilize the muscles in my ribs. I ripped out the horsehair braid because I knew that looked bad. I basically cut everything apart, ripped out the horsehair braid, and then flatlined all 3 of them together, which was a goofy thing to do because as it stands, the innermost layer on the inside of this is not the other layer of voile, it's the stiff net, and then 2 layers of voile, which it should have been voile, stiff net, voile, so you can't even see the stiff net, but I was done at this point. I had hurt myself and I wanted the bow to be done. And so they got flatlined, and then I finished the edges in bias tape, which then made for a great channel to put wire in. The bias tape looks really good. I was like opposed to using it at first because it's not sheer, but it looks really good actually, and it looks really clean, and it means you don't have to worry about any weird bunching if they don't sit right together. The wire that I used is just 16 gauge wire. Definitely wouldn't want to go any higher than that, and you could probably go maybe a little bit lower than that, but the important thing is that the wire is only in the top section of each of the sides of the bow. It's only up here, it's not on the bottom. I guess you could try to put it on the bottom, but my fear would be that if I put it on the bottom wouldn't drape right. Like, it looks pretty freaking perfect the way it is. I don't think you need the wire in the bottom. I think it looks totally fine just on the top. And then it's just your standard scrunch up the bow, get the bow put together in the middle, which I did a zip tie. I just like a zip tie because it's so easy. You don't have to try to sew through a bunch of layers. And I put the bow tie on it. There's my big giant bow. Here's the thing though, is this is how it attaches. Here's the back. I actually did 2 parachute clips, not on this part of the bow, but on these, so that it anchors where the bow loops are, which is gonna help it stay upright and keep that like really pretty like triangle in here instead of being flat. Like when I just had the horsehair braid in there, it tended to just like flatten out and it looked more like that when the horsehair braid was in there, but the wire keeps it up nice. And then there's 2 little parachute clips on the cosplay that it hooks into to cover up all of the ugly swoops. So that was the other thing that ended up in the Corey Richens trial was swoop. It's another thing EDB says. So I've prepared a big speech. Okay, I wrote this down, so it sounds like I'm reading. I am, but it is a great excuse to finally use the Dover button. I've said for years that this cosplay is unfinished, but it actually really just needed a bow. And actually the innermost skirt is not hemmed, but that will take me like 5 seconds once I get it off the dress form. It also needs like a more comfortable way to wear the sleeves. I probably need to go through and hand sew the swoopies down. But why is it taking me so long to go back and do that? Well, at the time, I felt incredibly insecure about my work as a cosplayer, and obviously the pandemic had a lot to do with that. But it's weird to think about that because at that time, I was completing some of the most intricate beading projects I have ever done. Like, this was made with leftover beads from my Sakizo diamond. You can like see my Sakizo diamond in the background of some of that old footage, like on the floor. It was a time when I was doing that, but I was so insecure about my work. It really made me feel like, it really gave me imposter syndrome because it's like, I can do this, but then I'm not measuring things properly because I'm lazy. Still a thing that is today. But does that mean that this is a bad cosplay? It does. It's a fine cosplay. It's a little funky. But the cosplay community has pockets of love and support. We have places that will lift you up and answer even the dumbest questions. I have built one of those spaces. But the community is also full of people that will give you unsolicited criticism that, while can be helpful sometimes, if you are already feeling bad about your work, just feels like a knife. I'll go ahead and start Dover over because it's almost done. The trying to produce the big speech by hitting the Dover button over and over again. At best, you get the unwarranted criticism, and at worst, you will get people that will rake you over the coals for like the tiniest little inaccuracy. And in late 2020, I was just like consumed by the fear of both of those things. But we do not create for other people, and we do not define our work by what other people might think of it. We create for ourselves, and we get to define our work. It's got construction stuff that I'm not proud of, that I don't even know why I did it back then. But when I put that thing on, nobody is looking at the weird bunched up beading in the back. They're looking at how pretty I look in this cosplay. I literally look like an ionic column in this. So now, in 2026, I see this for what it is. It is a incredibly intricately beaded, albeit flawed, handmade gown that only needed a bow to get it out of lockdown. Looks at how long Dover has.